Welcome to the I Am the Worst Parent Ever podcast with Nicole Merritt and Dr. Robert Zeitlin.
Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I recently had the pleasure of watching your TEDx talk, and something really stuck out for me. You said that a teacher said to you once that you should talk more. You have great ideas. And you talked about how that made you felt. And I'll tell you, just hearing that phrase, it's like, why as a parent am I not telling my children that every single day? Like, how good it would feel for somebody to tell me that right now. Like, you have good ideas, Nicole. You should talk more. I got to hear directly from you and live right now on the podcast. How did that make you feel when he said that to you? Because I'm telling you, I got chills that you told me he said that to you.
It took me, it blindsided me. I had no idea it was coming, and I'd never heard anyone say that to me before. I don't know why we don't say that as parents more. And for all the teachers that are listening now or will listen to the TED Talk, like, that's something you can say to kids a lot of the time. And if you mean it, of course. And he totally shocked me. I didn't know what to make of it. Honestly, I had spent a lot of time avoiding participating and speaking up. And here he was inviting me to do that more. And it came out of the blue. I didn't know what to do with it, but I'll tell you, that there's a direct line between that happening that one day at the water fountain when I felt totally overwhelmed, and me sitting here and giving a TED Talk and writing. And it's just like, it's amazing that I spent pretty much 30 years not hearing that, but it was like a ray of light. It was crazy.
Right. I think that's like the best compliment, vote of confidence in the world. And it just speaks to the power of words, whether it's the words that are said to you as a child, the words you overhear somebody saying about you, the words we speak of strangers. I wrote an article a while back, Dear Little Girl with the Smart Mouth, that had been syndicated by a few bigger media sites. And I was shocked at the amount of the response, the engagement. Like, people really cared about, us encouraging our children to speak up more. Do you see that in your practice or at the school, just kind of this new invigorating speak up movement?
I wish I saw it in the schools more, but you are starting to see it more. I'm going to say, even if those words never came out of your mouth to your kids, if your kids feel, what he said to me was outstanding, not just because of the words, but also because he saw me. He saw me in there hiding. He saw the potential, and now I see the potential everywhere. And so whether it's in my practice, whether it's in the schools, whether it's this organization I work with, this nonprofit locally that really encourages youth to find their voice and claim their voice. It's an important movement. And I think some would scoff at it like, we're too busy with like participation trophies and everyone's a perfect snowflake and everything. But I will say, everyone might not be a snowflake, and every voice might be a little, not every voice might be pleasant to hear, but everyone deserves to be able to be heard and seen. And for parents, for teachers, for psychologists, for anyone who's working with kids, I think taking a moment, slowing down, stopping, and seeing them and letting them know that you see them can be the most powerful affirmation that they mean something and that they have something to contribute. And that's where I was coming from with the TED Talk. I think that's where you're coming from with your Little Girl with the Smart Mouth article. I remember reading that. I think it's one of the first things I read of yours, and it was so moving to have a mom have this perspective on, not everything is good and bad. Not everything is you're behaving or you're not behaving. there are, we talk about grit and resilience all the time. Like, the kids should have setbacks so they actually can deal with things. But like, encouraging kids with a smart mouth, like that you have something to give, that's just a gift. It's a huge gift.
Right. I mean, I think that you said the slowing down and being present. Maybe you, for whatever reason, you don't feel comfortable saying that exact verb to your child. But just pay attention when they're talking to you. Look at them. Listen to them. Take an idea that they have and run with it. I can recall, you made me think of, I co-led my daughter's Girl Scouts, and each meeting had a lesson and a story, and we would read it, and there were always like these extra things you could do, and I'm like, no, we're not doing the extra stuff. Like, mommy's only got time for this, But my husband, it was like it was all about taking care of the earth and recycling and everything. Mm-hmm. He took my daughter's idea and ran with it in the little free time that he had. And they made this big poster board, and they put lights on it so it like lit up. And they went with it because she was excited about this, how she could take this over here and this idea that she had. And here was Daddy, who thought it was a terrific idea and took time out of his day to do it. I mean, we still talk about that poster board today, when something comes up about it. I mean, our kids, these little moments with our children when they feel heard, it matters. It matters so much.
That's so awesome. I mean, I think some kids will tell you about the one joke that made everyone laugh in the family, or the one silly thing that's, sort of become the trademark things. But those are the moments where you're noticed, you're heard, you're seen. And I think in a lot of families, things are moving too fast, and people are worried about, they're absorbed in themselves, or they're worried about stuff, or they're fighting over stuff, and kids and their strengths and their contributions get missed. And that happens all the time. And it's not the worst thing, for parents that are sitting here listening to this and saying, that's my family. We fight a lot, and the kids are, off managing themselves. That's a reality. That happens. But the opportunity, when you do have a chance to have an afternoon where it's not about, we're going to go do this, but like actually one parent and one kid, and the parent saying, what is it you want to do this afternoon? Let's go do that. Let's, you would be surprised that it's not, let's go spend $1 million and let's go have every, treat from every corner of the city. Like, it actually might be really simple. It might be, I really remember that time that we played at that sand park, and can we go back to the sand park?
Right. I mean, and I know I was very lucky to grow up in a home where I knew my voice was important. I knew it mattered. I knew that I should use it, that especially as a woman, like, I knew that I could do anything a man could do, and I could maybe even do it better. Like, I was raised with that, try not to be overly, confident. You want to have a humble confidence, but I was kind of raised like that. Like, you've got this, you've got nothing to be ashamed of, and you should speak up. And I try to raise my children with that same, humble confidence, and it does have to ride the line. But you need to teach your children the rules for speaking up smart. And I think that's maybe where the mark is being missed sometimes. Like, there's a difference between a smart and somebody that has a legitimate, logical point and reason and opinion. So many times my kids will say things, and I want to be like, I'm the parent, you shouldn't say that. But I'm like, well, you're kind of making a good point. Like, in my head, I'm like, it's kind of making sense. You kind of did interrupt her, or whatever it was. And we have to be willing to accept our children's opinions, and teach them how to respectfully engage, because I think that's where many of us adults falter. So you can imagine, like, a child is going to have a hard time with that. But how do you respectfully engage? What type of banter is allowed in what circumstance, and all those sort of things.
Yeah, we talked in another episode about parents talking in front of their kids about them. But I think sometimes we don't always recognize, not just that, but we also don't recognize what we're reinforcing. I really like it when you spoke up that time, or I really like what you had to say in the family meeting, or, when I sat in your class, I really thought what you raised your hand and said was really smart. But also there's other things that we're either sort of accidentally or that we're accidentally reinforcing. For instance, when you're praising a kid for not speaking up in some way, if you're like, all your friends were being really rowdy, but you were being quiet, you don't necessarily know why your kid was being quiet. You may praise them for being well behaved, but we also have to watch ourselves what we're accidentally reinforcing in our kids. What kind of kid we're noticing. When are you noticing your child, and what are they doing? What's actually happening inside?
Right. And sometimes we intentionally or unintentionally kind of do okay, you have every right to speak up, but now be quiet and listen to me.
Right.
I can find myself in the same day, sometimes in the same hour, encouraging my child to listen and then being like, 1 second, mommy's in the middle of something, or
right.
I don't have time for that right now. Or, so you have to build in, we talked about it before, time blocking. You have to time block in time for present, active communication and listening with your children. That's
one really good way to do it. I think it's, there are times where you need your kids to listen. And I got to tell you, in my experience, if you really need your kids to listen, because they're running down the block and you want them to stop at the corner, or because they're, heading in the wrong direction or something's going on and you need them to listen, then it works a lot better. Their ears are a lot more open if you had listened to them previously that day. If they're already on the channel, if you've already sort of tuned your walkie-talkie with them and you're on the same channel, they're going to hear you in ways that the parent who is always yelling at them gets tuned out.
Right. If you on the way to pick up, they're trying to tell you a story and you're busy checking your social media, they don't want to please you when they get out of that car. They're going to run away from you and do something they're not supposed to do. But had I listened to the story about, let's say the lizard, and then right as we pulled up, I said, now remember, when we get to that crosswalk, you stop and wait for mommy. And we both made time to be present and listen for one another, we would have avoided, a scary kind of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same in any conversation with kids or other adults, or, I've written a little about the parent-teacher conference and how hard a sort of moment that is. But one of the reasons that I'm a positive psychologist and I've doubled down on the strengths is because I noticed whenever I was giving parents feedback, for instance, about their kids, about their learning or about their learning profile or some good news, bad news situation, that if I started with the good news, it actually opened up people's ears. You mean you see my kid? Oh, you had fun working with my kid? Like that brings them into the conversation. If I start with, I found this problem and they're reading and this, like that becomes a newscast. That becomes something they watch on TV. So I noticed the total difference if I ever started with the strengths, like all of a sudden we're having a conversation and they're engaged. And right. So I thought, as a positive psychologist, why not do it all strengths? And let's, here's the potential, and speaking up and having confidence is one of the results from that.
Right. How often do we, tune out, mid-conversation when we don't like what we're hearing, and we always talk about kids, be careful how you describe your kid and talk about your kid, because they become what they hear you saying, that they are. And if you're saying, little Johnny did this, that wasn't very good, and then he did it, and then, now everybody's tuned out because apparently little Johnny, is not very good. And they're not going to hear everything else. So I totally agree with what you're saying, with lead with the strengths. And whether it's a parent-teacher conference, whether it's a doctor and a patient, whether it's you and your spouse or you and your child, like come from that place of you should be heard and you need to be heard.
In one of my first work situations, there was a woman who worked in a department that I was I was supervising. And she had learned somewhere along the line, possibly in the military, to come in and notice something that I was wearing or something about my hair or something, and just offer, and it felt uncomfortable to her. You could tell it was sort of like forced, but she'd say, I really like your shoes today, or that's a great color on you, or something like that. And it's amazing how we're so starved for that kind of even just easy, simple compliment, even not just like a heavily invested, I see your character strength kind of compliment. But it's amazing how it's just like, oh, like this person is worth spending my time with. Like I might get another compliment, or they see me and it starts a conversation. It's incredible the difference and how easily you can make a mark doing that, because everyone's rushing around pointing out all the problems and all the flaws.
Right. I agree with you. Question. So like for me, I found that like I would say I was kind of self-conscious when I was younger. But for when I turned 30, there was definitely an extra boost then. But even when I became a mom, I just feel like my ability to speak up and find my voice, everything just kind of like got honed. And maybe it's because when you have children, it's like you have to voice your concerns to that pediatrician because you have a gut feeling that something is wrong, or, you're not going to stand up for your child being bullied in school or not getting the education they deserve. Do you feel when you were younger and that professor mentioned that to you, did it just go from there and get better and better? Or did it happen at different stages in your life where you kind of felt like I've got my voice and I'm confident enough to use it?
That's an excellent question. And it did get better from there, but it definitely was a stage thing. I'll remember actually a mom your age, and I was a little older, standing with her at a birthday party. So both of our kids were, my son, actually the last episode we just talked about my daughter all the time, but my son is off playing in a gymnasium area, and her son and their best friends, and they're off there, and we're standing behind the ropes because we were told, stand back here. Parents are like cordoned off. And we're sitting there, and I had always looked at her as like a younger mom, and like kind of I'm more mature and I'd had more experience, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, and we're in this warehouse kind of gym setting, the lights totally go off, the power drops, and everything turns completely black. Like you can't see anything. And you have little 5-year-old kids out in the distance, and they start whinging and they start to whine and cry. And you're sitting there as a parent, you're worried, and I'm sitting behind this rope because I was told what to do, right? As the parent, you stand here, and I'm standing next to her, and all of a sudden she steps over the rope and she ventures out in the darkness to find her kid, right? The same kind of empowering feeling that you had at 30 of like, I'm a parent, this is my job, this is my responsibility. And I'm looking down at the rope and I'm looking at her, I'm like, oh, we're allowed to do that? Like there was a moment, so definitely in stages, Nicole, because that was a wake-up call for me that like, you're the advocate for your kid. Go out and find your kid. If he's out there crying in the dark and scared, that's your job. Step across that rope and go find him.
Right. And always speak up. Like, look at what an impact this lady made on you with her one action. Like, she probably doesn't even know, how she has impacted you. And that you will always remember that moment that her stepping over the rope was her speaking up for her child, and she was going to go get them right now, whether anybody told her she could or not. Like that was, she was in mom mode. I think that's why we always have to pay attention to strangers and the words that are spewing out of their mouth, pay attention to our children and what they are saying. You never know when a little gem of wisdom is going to make its way into you and make a big difference.
Exactly. And to your point, just in closing about the stages, it's never too late to try out your voice. It's never too late to find that moment to speak up. Give it a try. You never know. It doesn't all have to happen at once. You can just try it. It doesn't matter where you start.
Yeah, totally agree. And you know what? Try using your voice one day to give a compliment to somebody else and see the smile on their face, and you're going to love how that makes you feel.
Agreed.
Have a great day.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the I Am the Worst Parent Ever podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss an episode.